himself and sought to banish his older brother, Polynices. The two incited a bitter war, and both brothers fell at the city gates. Creon, the brother-in-law of Oedipus, declared himself the new king, having first aligned himself with Eteocles and denounced Polynices as a traitor. Now he ordered that Polynices be denied burial, leaving his body on the battleground, surrounded by guards and encircled by vultures. Anyone who violated his proclamation would be stoned to death. Antigone and her sister Ismene were at their uncle's mercy. The fact that Antigone was betrothed to Creon's son, Haemon, seemed to earn her no favor. Despite the dangers, Antigone secretly visited her sister and whispered her intentions to honor their brother through burial. In doing so, she would be defying Creon, but abiding by divine law, which insisted that one must bury one's own flesh and blood. When Ismene refused to join her, insisting that girls should not disobey men, Antigone set out alone. She knelt by Polynices' corpse, undetected, and began sprinkling it with dust. When the guards realized and reported the disturbance, Creon ordered them to find the man who so defied defiantly committed the crime. At midday, Antigone returned to perform a more complete burial, when suddenly a thick dust storm whirled onto the plain and chucked out the sky, as if conjured by the gods to aid her. Creon's guards, blinded and disoriented, didn't see as Antigone's stole into their midst. And covered her brother's body with more earth and water. As the tempest dissipated, the soldiers were shocked to see that the culprit was a girl, and the princess no less. Creon barraged Antigone with accusations and insults, hoping to protect her sister. Ismene confessed to the crime, but Antigone was steadfast. She insisted she acted alone and according to divine laws. Haemon urged his father to be reasonable and merciful, but Creon was convinced forgiving Antigone would be a critical admission of weakness. He spared Ismene, but ignored his son's unremitting pleas. To evade direct blame for the young princess's death, Creon ordered a passive execution. Antigone would be shut away in an underground cave. As the gods dragged the sisters away, Ismene was filled with remorse, wishing to be by Antigone's side. Creon maintained a show of power, and Thebes fell into a fearful state of mourning. But then Creon was visited by the wise, blind prophet Moments later, when Creon entered, he was met by Haemon's broken, hateful glare. Haemon spat in his father's face, drew his sword, and lunged. But as Creon dodged the thrust, Haemon turned the blade upon himself and wrapped his arms around Antigone in one last tragic embrace. Word of Haemon and Antigone's deaths reached Thebes before Creon's return, and upon hearing the devastating news, the queen took her own life at an altar, cursing her husband with her dying breaths. Failing to yield to Antigone's righteous rebellion, Creon, in all his pride, had learned his lesson too late. Anguished, hands bloodied, and all hopes dashed, Creon's attendants led him back into the palace. The sun is not exactly Greek mythology, I must say, but it is an interesting story titled The Tale of the Brothers Who Outwitted the Demon Queen. And for this one, I'll be reading it with a soft-speaking voice instead of whispering. The kingdom of Valkenburg was on the precipice of demonic takeover. A mysterious woman beguiled the king and infiltrated the royal family. But she wasn't human. She was the daughter of the matriarch of all Rakashas. Rakashas are a dreadful class of demons, and under her beautiful facade lurked an insatiable appetite for flesh. The king's human queen bore him a son, as did the demon queen, passing her powers on to him. The two princesses came to be known as Nilkamal and Laukamal. Their bewitched father was distant, and the mothers couldn't have been more different, but they were inseparable. Nilkamal fiercely protected Laukamal. As the brothers grew, the Rakasha queen secretly devoured the palace's elephants and horses and drained Laukamal's mother of life. But it was only when Nilkamal found his brother in a demon's clutches one night, the king paralyzed nearby, that he realized his mother's true nature. Just before she managed to devour the brothers. But soon, she regurgitated a pair of metal eggs and hid them in the remote bamboo grove of a distant kingdom. She didn't realize that Nilkamal and Laukamal had evaded death, encapsulated in the eggs. With Hackenberg under her full control, Rakashas hunted demons freely. Finally, one day, the princess burst from the eggs, determined to defeat the Rakasha queen and the scourge of the demons. First, they came upon a land terrorized by lesser monsters called Kakashas, and staked out an area they frequented. Laukamal standing guard as Nilkamal slept. That night, the Kakashas approached and asked who was within. As the brothers had agreed, the first word Laukamal uttered was Nilkamal's name. It made the monsters quake with fear, for they knew that Nilkamal was the son of a powerful Rakashi. To make the ruse more convincing, Laukamal stuck the tip of Nilkamal's crown through a small crack and said it was his fingernail. Sprayed scalding oil from a lamp and called it Nilkamal's spit, and presented a sword he said was Nilkamal's tongue. Pricked by the crown, burnt by the oil, and cut by the sword. The cautious retreated. But when they returned and again asked who was inside, Lalkamal, half asleep, accidentally uttered his name first. The cautious burst in, waking Nilkamal, whose sword soon slayed them all. The Rakasha queen heard the news and sent an anonymous message to the kingdom of the Princess Victory. It was Akibar's king. It said Akinbar's king was ill, and the only cure was oil from a Rakashi head. In order to destroy the demon source of life and save their fathers, the two princes sharpened their swords and journeyed to Rakashi Desh, the Rakashi homeland. When they arrived, they weren't slaughtered as the Rakashi queen had hoped. Indeed, they remained inconspicuous as Nilkamal called for his grandmother, the monster matriarch. She asked them to prove they were her grandchildren by eating iron peas, which Nilkamal did effortlessly. As Lalkamal munched on secretly substituted chickpeas, successfully fooled, the Rakashi matriarch welcomed the brothers. They feigned fear that the Rakashis would eat them if she went away, but she reassured them that nothing would happen to her, for at the bottom of a deep well was a box holding two hornets, one containing her daughter, the Rakashi Queen's life, the other containing all remaining Rakashi life force. Once the Rakashas went hunting, the brothers took the opportunity to find the well, and Nilkamal plunged in to retrieve the box. The Rakashas sensed danger as soon as the hornets touched open air, but they couldn't reach the two princes before Nilkamal killed the first hornet, and the Rakashas fell lifeless. The princess finally returned to Akinpur on the backs of divine birds. Following the message's instructions, they carried a Rakashi head with them. The matriarchs, when she saw the Rakashi queen, nearly fainted in shock, and Nilkamal swiftly killed the second hornet. At last, Akinpo's king resurfaced from the demon's spell, and the kingdom was free of invading evils. time, we're going to be reading one of my favorites, the story of Psyche and Eros. Psyche was one of 3 sisters, princesses in a Grecian kingdom. All 3 were beautiful, but Psyche was the most beautiful. Aphrodite, the goddess of love and beauty, heard about Psyche and her sisters and was jealous of all the attention people paid to Psyche. So, she summoned her son, Eros, and told him to put a spell on Psyche. Always obedient, Eros flew down to earth with 2 vials of potions. Invisible, he sprinkled the sleeping Psyche with a potion that would make men avoid her when it came to marriage. Accidentally, he pricked her with one of his arrows, which makes someone fall in love instantly, and she startled awake. Her beauty, in turn, startled Eros, and he accidentally pricked himself as well. Feeling bad about what he had done, he then sprinkled her with the other potion, which would provide her with joy in her life. Sure enough, Psyche, although still beautiful, could find no husband. Her parents, afraid that they had offended the gods somehow, asked an oracle to reveal Psyche's future husband. The oracle said that while no man would have her, there is a creature on the top of a mountain that would marry her. Surrendering to the inevitable, she headed for the mountain. When she came within sight, she was lifted by a gentle wind and carried the rest of the way. When she arrived, she saw that her new home was in fact a rich and beautiful palace. Her new husband never permitted her to see him, but he proved to be a true and gentle lover. He was, of course, Eros himself. After some time, she grew lonely for her family, and she asked to be allowed to have her sisters for a visit. When they saw how beautiful Psyche's new home was, they grew jealous. They went to her and told her not to forget that her husband was some kind of monster, and that, no doubt, he was only fattening her up in order to eat her. They suggested that she hide a lantern and a knife near her bed so that the next time he visited her, she could look to see if he was indeed a monster, and cut off his head if it was so. Her sisters convinced her this was best, so the next time her husband came to visit her, she had a lamp and a knife ready. When she raised the lamp, she saw that her husband was not a monster, but Eros. Surprised, he ran to the window and flew off. She jumped out after him, but fell to the ground and lay there unconscious. When she awoke, the palace had disappeared, and she found herself in a field near her old home. She went to the temple of Aphrodite and prayed for help. Aphrodite responded by giving her a series of tasks to do. Tasks that Aphrodite believed the girl would not be able to accomplish. The first was a matter of sorting a huge pile of mixed grains into separate piles. Psyche looked at the pile and despaired, but Eros secretly arranged for an army of hens to separate the piles. Aphrodite, returning the following morning, accused Psyche of having had help, as indeed she had. The next task involved getting a snippet of golden fleece from each one of a special herd of sheep that lived across a nearby river. The god of the river advised Psyche to wait until the sheep sought shade from the midday sun. Then they would be sleepy and not attack her. When Psyche presented Aphrodite with a fleece, the goddess again accused her of having had help. The third task Aphrodite set before Psyche was to get a cup of water from the river Styx, where it cascades down from an incredible height. Psyche thought it was all over, and then an eagle helped her by carrying the cup up the mountain and returning it full. Aphrodite was livid, knowing full well that Psyche could never have done this alone. Psyche's next task was to go into hell to ask Persephone, wife of Hades, for a box of magic makeup. Thinking that she was doomed, she decided to end it all by jumping off a cliff. But a voice told her not to and gave her instructions on making her way to hell to get the box. But the voice warned, "Do not look inside the box under any circumstances." Psyche received the box from Persephone and made her way back home. But, true to her nature, she was unable to restrain herself from peeking inside. To her surprise, there was nothing but darkness, which put her into a deep sleep. Eros could no longer restrain himself either, and wakened her. He told her to bring the box to Aphrodite, and that he would take care of the rest. Eros went to the heavens and asked Zeus to intervene. He spoke of his love for Psyche so eloquently that Zeus was moved to grant him his wish. Eros brought Psyche to Zeus, who gave her a cup of ambrosia, the drink of immortality. Zeus then joined Psyche and Eros in eternal marriage. They later had a daughter who would be named Pleasure. Now, I'm sure you're all familiar about the Trojan horse. So let me tell you about the tragedy of the one guy who was right about the Trojan horse. For 10 grueling years, the Greeks laid siege to Troy, scattering ships and encampments across the city shores. But as the Trojans awoke for another day of battle, they found their enemies had vanished overnight, leaving behind only an enormous wooden horse. Seeing this as a symbol of the Greek surrender, the soldiers dragged their prize into the city and began to celebrate. But one Trojan wasn't happy. Glaucon, a Syrian priest, was deeply suspicious of the Greek gift. He reminded his fellow Trojans of their enemy's reputation for trickery and cautioned them not to accept this strange offering. The crowd jeered at his warning, but this priest was undeterred. He forced his way to the wooden beast and thrust his sword into its belly. Yet his blade drew no blood, and if there were men shifting inside, he couldn't hear them over the crowd. Still grim with foreboding, he retreated home and enlisted his sons in preparing a sacrifice to the gods. But his fate and that of his fellow Trojans was already sealed. The gods had decided to grant the Greeks victory by ensuring the success of their scheme to infiltrate Troy, and Poseidon sought to punish the priest for threatening that plan. Two great serpents emerged from the sea's rolling waves and descended on the priest and his sons. The seer's violent death went unnoticed amidst the celebrations. But that night, when tragedy struck, the Trojans finally remembered the old priest's warning. His tragic tale inspired countless retellings across the ancient world. Virgil describes the seer's demise in his epic poem, the Aeneid, and Sophocles composed an entire play about the ill-fated priest. However, his most famous and influential depiction is a marble statue called Laocoon and his sons, likely carved by a trio of artists from Rhodes. The exact origins of this piece remain mysterious, with current theories dating its creation anywhere from 200 BCE to 68 CE. Whenever it was made, this sculpture remains the epitome of the Hellenistic Baroque style. But even with a tradition known for its dramatic facial expressions and contorted figures, no other piece in this style comes close to the intensity of Laocoon and his sons. The nearly life-size figures are writhing in agony, straining to untangle massive snakes from their limbs. Their faces are packed with desperation and hopelessness. Yet Laocoon's expression is fiercely determined to resist. The scene is also uniquely brutal, posed precisely as the serpent's venomous jaws are about to bite down. displayed as the centerpiece of Emperor Nero's Domus Aurea Palace complex. This gruesome sculpture was one of the most talked about artworks of its time. Renowned Roman writer Pliny the Elder even went so far as to call it preferable to any other production of the art of painting or of statuary. Unfortunately, the statue was lost when Domus Aurea was consumed by fire in 109 CE. But Laocoon's tale was far from finished. In 1506, Michelangelo, then the most famous sculptor in Rome, received a message that Pope Julius II had unearthed something marvelous, even caked with dirt. Laocoon and his sons astonished Michelangelo. The dramatic musculature was over the top, but all the more powerful for being so extreme. And the curving shapes of its serpent and human figures drew his eyes in constant motion. Pope Julius prominently displayed the piece at the Vatican, but its influence on Michelangelo is what made the statue truly famous. The sculpture's emotive, exaggerated elements transformed his approach to representing the human body. His paintings and sculptures began to feature contorted poses, referred to as figura serpentinata, meaning snake-like shapes, and his celebrated work in the Sistine Chapel centered on muscular, hyper-extended figures. Soon, Michelangelo's new style sparked an entire artistic movement called Mannerism, influencing artists throughout the 1500s to exaggerate and twist human bodies for dramatic effect. Since artists of the Renaissance revered ancient Greco-Roman art above all else, perhaps it's not surprising that Laocoon and his sons made such a large impact. But not even the real Laocoon could have predicted that his likeness would become one of the most influential sculptures ever made. Thank you so much for everyone who listened until then. I have to admit there were definitely a few points, a few areas where I could have improved my storytelling. but this is my first time, so I hope you could be patient with me. I feel that quite a lot of, how do I say this? Quite a lot of lesser known characters related to Greek mythology's names are quite difficult to pronounce. So I do hope that you could give me another chance if I decide to do another storytelling video. I absolutely adore Greek mythology, so I do want to do another reading of actual stories this time, similar to Psyche and Eros, and it'll definitely be better, so I ask you to be patient with me in this journey, I guess. If you enjoyed listening to me speak, then I hope you could stay notified for any videos that I might publish in the future. If you want to speak to me personally, then my socials are right here. You can contact me either through X or through Instagram. I have notifications on for both of these accounts, so if you message me, I'll be able to get it right away, and I'll also do my best to respond right away. What else is there to say? Right. If you would like to hear me talk about something, play something, read something, or do something, then I would highly appreciate it if you could leave a comment down below for what you want me to do, and I'll do my best to accommodate each and every response. I am truly enjoying this. I don't know. I'm enjoying recording and talking to you guys, interacting with other people, and I'm really grateful for everyone who subscribed and stuck through. There are a lot of, as I mentioned, areas for improvement, so, and I am aware of them, but if there's anything you want to mention in particular, then you can drop it down in the comments as well. I just ask that you be kind about your words, with your words. My heart cannot take harshness. So, yeah. I'm thinking about reading stories from Percy's version of Greek mythology next time. I had a book of it before, but it got lost. Well, it didn't get lost, it actually started falling apart, and then it got lost because so many pages were just missing. I don't know, the binder, the glue on the binder weakened, and so whenever you would flip the pages, they would come off so easily, and no amount of glue or tape could fix it. So unfortunately, I lost that. It was a gift too, one that I really enjoyed. Okay, that's enough yapping. Thank you so much once again, and I hope everyone has a wonderful, wonderful day ahead. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night. This is Nana Senseki, always